In war, deception can save more lives than bullets. In 1944, as Allied forces advanced through war-torn Europe, a mysterious unit appeared, one that carried no heavy weapons, fired no real shots, and yet confused entire divisions of the German army. This is the true story of the Ghost Army, a secret battalion of artists, engineers, and illusionists who fought Hitler with nothing more than creativity, sound, and courage. By mid-1944, the Allies had landed in Normandy. The beaches of France were stained with sacrifice, but the invasion was a success. Still, the road to Berlin was long and treacherous. The German army, though wounded, remained one of the most formidable fighting forces in history. They knew the land, the weather, and the terrain. Every Allied move risked turning into a massacre. To win, the Allies needed not just strength, but imagination. That's when the U.S. Army created one of the strangest and most brilliant units ever assembled, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, later known simply as the Ghost Army. Their mission was as audacious as it was unconventional, to pretend to be a massive force and trick the enemy into making fatal mistakes. Their goal was not to kill the Germans, but to deceive them. Formed in January 1944, this unit included just over 1,000 men. But these weren't typical soldiers. They were painters, sculptors, sound technicians, radio operators, set designers, and art students from schools like Yale, Pratt Institute, and Cooper Union. Among them were men who would one day become famous, like Ellsworth Kelly, a future pioneer of modern art, and Bill Blass, who would rise to fame as one of America's greatest fashion designers. They didn't carry rifles, they carried brushes, recorders, and radios. Their arsenal was built on illusion. Massive inflatable tanks and artillery pieces, so realistic that even Allied pilots often mistook them for real from the air. Canvas jeeps, wooden airplanes, fake roads, and camouflage nets painted by hand. These props became their weapons. But deception required more than visuals. It required sound and coordination. The unit used 3 layers of deception: visual, sonic, and radio. The visual team built entire fake camps, carefully designed to be visible to enemy reconnaissance aircraft. They studied how real units looked from the air: vehicle tracks, tent placement, even the way laundry hung between lines. Every detail was crafted to sell the illusion. Then came the sound team. They recorded authentic battlefield noises, truck engines, artillery fire, soldiers shouting orders, metal clanking, and mixed them into 30-minute loops. Mounted on massive speakers attached to half-tracks, these recordings could be heard up to 25 kilometers away. From a distance, it felt like an entire division was moving in. Finally, the radio team, the masters of invisible warfare. They mimicked real units' radio traffic, using call signs, jargon, and coded messages to make the deception complete. German intelligence, intercepting these signals, would hear what they expected to hear: a large Allied presence preparing for battle. Together, these 3 illusions created what one officer later called a traveling roadshow of deception. The Ghost Army could simulate the presence of up to 30,000 troops, when in reality there were barely 1,000 men and a few trucks full of air. Their first real test came shortly after D-Day. The Allies were pushing through France, but their lines were stretched thin. In July 1944, the Ghost Army was ordered to fake the presence of the 6th Armored Division near the town of St. Lo. They inflated tanks overnight, set up fake artillery, and blasted engine sounds through the night sky. German reconnaissance planes spotted the camp and reported it as genuine. Within 24 hours, enemy forces shifted positions, exactly as the Allies had hoped. But the deception didn't always happen behind the front lines. Many missions took place dangerously close to combat. In Luxembourg, during the harsh winter of 1944, the Ghost Army set up fake convoys using jeeps painted with real division markings. Soldiers acted as generals, visiting local towns, drinking in cafes, spreading rumors about troop movements. All part of the show. Every detail mattered, even the way they folded their maps or how they wore their insignias. These weren't just soldiers, they were actors in a deadly play. One of their most daring missions came before the crossing of the Rhine River in March 1945. The Ghost Army was ordered to simulate 2 full divisions, over 30,000 men, near the town of Wesel. Their job was to convince the Germans that the Allies would cross the river there. They deployed hundreds of inflatable tanks, parked decoy vehicles, and blasted recordings of pontoon bridges being built. The real crossing, however, happened miles away. When the Germans realized the truth, it was too late. The deception had worked perfectly. Historians later concluded that this operation alone may have saved thousands of Allied lives by drawing enemy fire and confusion away from the true invasion point. But success came with risk. The Ghost Army carried no combat weapons. If captured, they would be treated as spies, not soldiers. Death was almost certain. Yet, despite the danger, not a single mission was compromised. The unit's secrecy was absolute. Most soldiers' families had no idea what they were really doing. When they wrote letters home, they simply said they were doing top-secret work. Over time, their illusions grew more sophisticated. They used lighting to simulate camps at night, created fake roads with reflective tape to mimic convoys, and even used sound to suggest tank engines idling in the fog. Sometimes they combined all 3 effects at once, sound, sight, and radio, to create total deception. German prisoners of war later confessed that they had fallen for it completely. They believed the Allies had far more divisions than they actually did. When the war finally ended in 1945, the Ghost Army faded into silence. Their missions were classified, buried in government archives. For more than 50 years, their story was unknown, hidden even from military historians. Only in the 1990s did the files begin to surface, revealing the extraordinary truth. A group of creative young men had helped shorten the war through art, imagination, and deception. In 2022, decades after their service, the Ghost Army was finally honored with the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest distinctions in the United States. For many, it was a recognition long overdue, a tribute to soldiers who fought without firing a shot. Today, their legacy lives on. Military strategists still study their operations as examples of psychological warfare done right. Their story reminds us that victory is not always won by force. Sometimes it is won by the mind. The Ghost Army proved that imagination can be as powerful as any weapon. They turned paint, sound, and illusion into tools of victory. They fought the most brutal war in history, not with destruction, but with deception. This was not just an army of soldiers, it was an army of artists. You've been watching World War II War Files. Subscribe and open the next file in history's greatest deception.